Hello, my name is Kay Chamberlain and welcome to my channel where I talk about comic books. This week, we are continuing our deep dive into all of the Friday the 13th comics with Pamela's Tale. The Friday the 13th franchise has had 12 movies so far, but the interesting thing is that it's never had an origin movie. We know the simple parts of Jason Voorhees' origin. He drowned in a lake, his mother became a psychopath, killed a bunch of people, Jason came back after his mother died, and he became a psychopathic killer as well. But that's as far as it goes when it comes to an origin for Friday the 13th. Most other horror franchises at that point had their own origin movies that delve deeper into the main antagonists of those films. Their childhoods, their family, and what led them down the path they eventually took. Friday the 13th never had that. Or that's what you'd think if you didn't know that there was a comic book series, a 2-issue miniseries, which is Pamela's Tale, and this is essentially Friday the 13th Origins. The 2-issue miniseries follows a young Pamela Voorhees as she navigates the life of single motherhood. She begins the story pregnant with Jason. It chronicles her birth of Jason and raising him as a young child. So we get to see all of that stuff play out, things that we have never seen in the movies. We get to know Pamela more as a character. We get to see how she descended into becoming a psychopath. It's one of the most interesting of the Friday the 13th comic books because it's the only one that isn't about Jason Voorhees. It's about his mom. The miniseries is written by Mark Andreyko with art by Sean Mall, and without further ado, let's just get straight into it. Immediately, the book begins in a way that I didn't expect, but is an obvious beginning to a story like this once you read it. On Friday, June 13th, 1980, a young woman named Annie, who is the false protagonist of Friday the 13th, enters a nearby diner. She's on her way to Camp Crystal Lake, or as the locals call it, Camp Blood. She is a counselor and a cook, and she's ready to start her job at the camp. And this truck driver, whose name is Enos, decides to help her by giving her a lift to the camp, which tracks with the movie. This is exactly how the movie plays out. They leave the diner, they begin chatting to one another. They walk into this guy named Crazy Ralph, who says exactly what he says in the movie. He says that she's going to Camp Blood, ain't ya? You'll never come back again. It's got a death curse. Line for line, beat for beat, it's exactly the same as the movie. On her way to the camp, Enos tells her about the curse of Jason Voorhees, the fact that he drowned at the lake. But Annie kind of shrugs it off because it's just a folk tale. Annie attempts to hitch a ride and a car stops. So she asks the driver if they can take her to Camp Crystal Lake and if they know where it is. Now in the movie, we don't get to see who this is because it's a part of the mystery. It is Pamela Voorhees, but we don't know that. But in this book, they reveal immediately that it's Pamela Voorhees. This is the point in the movie where Annie is killed by Pamela Voorhees. However, in the book, we get to see what happened between them before that happened. Annie asks Pamela if she has any children, and Pamela says, yes, I have a child, but it's a very long story. Anna says that she's got all day, or a long ride. So Pamela decides to tell Annie her origin story, or where she came from. In Cadiz, Ohio, September 1947, a young Pamela Voorhees was a newlywed, a housewife, and was predictably in a shitty relationship with an abusive husband. She was also pregnant at the time with Jason, but was too afraid to tell her husband out of fear of what he would do to her. One night, her husband Elias returns home, and we get to see just how awful he really is. He's looking in the fridge for beer, and is angry that there aren't any that have been pre-chilled for him. So Pamela comes over and is like, hey, I've got a pre-chilled beer for you right here, honey. And she's also holding a glass of water. And Elias, like a dick, grabs the beer off of her and then smashes the glass in her hands, which cuts her hand, and so it's bleeding. And he just doesn't care. Like, don't start with the waterworks again. I had a shitty day at the shitty mine and I'm goddamn hungry. Yes, dear. And don't cry in the goddamn food either. Pamela is kidding herself in this relationship because she says that although Elias is a terrible man on the outside who is very brutish and abusive to her, he is a sweetheart on the inside and they make great love to one another, and that's enough to keep her in the relationship and not try to get away. But at the same time, if she tried to get away, he would probably kill her, and that's why she hasn't. As she brings her his food, he throws a cigarette at her face, like an ass. And this is the moment it's established that Pamela has a close relationship with Jason and talks to him. And he talks to her. But it's unclear whether or not he is talking to her or if it's all in her head. Because there's a moment where Jason tells her, tell him, mummy. Tell him now. Because Jason wants her to tell him that she's pregnant with someone. And this is a direct reference to the Friday the 13th movie, where there is a moment where Pamela Voorhees mumbles to herself, kill her, mummy. Kill her. Which is a representation of Jason's voice in her mind telling her to kill people. So it's a clear throwback to that, or a setup to that. Pamela answers Jason, telling him that she can't right now, and Elias thinks that she's talking back to him. It's like, what did you say to me? How many times do I gotta tell you about your back talk, huh? No, Elias, I wasn't... And Elias just punches her in the face. Not so damn chatty now, are you? He then beats the absolute crap out of Pamela off panel, and we see the aftermath where the furniture has just been strewn all over the room. But all Pamela cares about is Jason's well-being. Oh, my dear Jason, did he hurt you too? No, mummy, I'm alright. But he'll kill us next time. I know, baby. But if he finds out I'm pregnant, he'll... You know what to do, mummy. No, I don't, Jason. What? Kill him, mummy. Kill him. So this is the first time that Jason officially tells his mother to kill somebody. And this is what would fuel her vengeance towards the counselors as well, and why she repeatedly says that to herself. It's Jason saying it to her. The iconic catchphrase, Kiki Mama, that is known, that the characters of the movies will hear before Jason appears to them and kills them, is kill him, mummy, kill him, shortened down, Kiki Mama. Pamela grabs an axe, enters Elias's room while he is asleep, and as he wakes up, she swings the axe above his head. Wake up, Elias, I have something for you. Huh? Pam? Oh, sweet Jesus! She brings the hammer down on Elias's head, straight through the back of his head, killing him instantly. Now at this moment you're probably thinking, she's relaying this story to Annie. Isn't Annie freaked out about the fact that Pamela just killed her husband? Well, there's an explanation for it in this. Pamela doesn't tell Annie that she killed her husband. She just says to Annie that he had a sudden death, like a heart attack or something. Jason conveys his love to his mother, and his mother reciprocates that love, saying that no one will hurt them ever again, and she uses the axe to chop Elias's body into pieces. She then loads his body into a bag, dumps it into the back of her truck, and then sets the caravan alight and blowing it up. She drives away in her pickup truck, looking forward towards a new life, with Jason. Like a phoenix from the ashes, I had a new life. She drove to a nearby lake to dump Elias's remains, and then tells Annie that, luck would have it, her destiny brought her to Camp Crystal Lake. Annie points out that Pamela has just driven past the entrance to Camp Crystal Lake, and Pamela states that she knows a shortcut, and they instead head down a different path that's off-road. Like, besides, you haven't heard the rest of my story. So already Annie's getting a little bit worried. It's a little weird what Pamela is doing right now. A young Pamela drives all the way to Crystal Lake, where she finds a house for sale. Apparently the owners of the house have stated that it is haunted, but Jason says that he loves the house, and that's enough for Pamela to purchase the house and for them to live there. At this point, it's easy to realize that Pamela has no free will of her own. It's an interesting thing that I noticed, is that when she was with Elias was in control of the relationship. She had no free will in that relationship. She was just forced to serve his every whim and take his punishment. And she's in a very similar relationship with Jason, where she has no free will with Jason. Jason controls everything that she does. Every decision she makes is because of Jason, is a decision made by Jason. She kills her husband because Jason wants her to. She buys this house because Jason wants her to. Pamela gets a job at a local diner and is managing to get her life together. She's a single mother, she has a job now. The job is thanks to Jason. Jason tells her to ask for a job, and so Pamela asks for a job at this diner and gets the job. Just more examples of Jason being the one in control of her life and her not having any free will. One day while she's working, the owner of the diner, Mr. Droage, comes to Pamela and introduces her to a couple known as David Christie and Louise. They love Pamela's cooking and they want her to cook at their camp for the summer. And Pamela's like, I can't leave my job, I have a job right here. And Mr. Droage is like, you're not leaving your job, you'll still have your job here. You're only going to be away for the summer. So Pamela agrees to the job, and that's when Jason yells, Mummy! And Pamela suddenly screams out in pain, falling to the ground. Everyone starts crowding around her. They're like, oh my god, Pamela, are you okay? Breathe, Pam. Just breathe. Ah! And so we find Pam in the hospital. She's giving birth to Jason, and everyone's trying to calm her down, saying that pain during birth is natural. Like, then why does it hurt so much? Because nature isn't always pretty. Now push. And she pushes. The doctors see the baby, and they're like, oh my god, Christ on a cross. What is it? I want to see my son. And so Pamela notes that all the doctors are incredibly scared or have worried faces. But when she gets to see her son, she doesn't care. She loves Jason immediately. Oh, Jason, you're perfect. And we get to see, for the first time in the franchise, baby Jason Voorhees. And he doesn't look bad. He just looks like a baby who has a physical disability or physical deformities. It's kind of sad knowing what would eventually happen to him, because at this point in time, he's just a baby. I mean, he did convince his mother to kill his father, but we don't know that for sure. For all we know, that could have just been Pamela's psyche telling her to kill her father, and she just tells herself it's Jason. Annie tells Pamela to stop the car, and Pamela doesn't. And Annie's like, what are you doing? And so she quickly jumps out of the car and falls down a hill, badly hurting herself. It's like, oh my god, no, why are you doing this? Pamela stops the car nearby Annie. Like, where did she go? Ah! And he falls over, She sees Pamela right there holding a knife and is like, please don't do this, no! And then Pamela slits Annie's throat, just like in the movie, except we actually see her do it. And Annie falls onto the ground, bleeding to death. Look what you made me do. You made me get my knife all dirty. So Pamela cleans her knife off with Annie's scarf? Or coat, I think that's what it is. And we flash back to 1957 at Camp Crystal Lake, where Pamela is cutting into a pie. You think that it's a knife covered in blood, but it's just a knife covered in cherry pie, I guess. That's when Mr. Christie approaches Pamela and tells her that something is wrong with Jason. And it is revealed to Pamela that in his spare time, Jason has been torturing and killing animals, like cats and things like that, and bringing it to this woman like he's proud of it, like he did something good. I'm just gonna be straight up when I talk about this. I do not like this. I don't like Jason being portrayed as a psychopath before he dies. I don't like the fact that he coerced his mother into killing his father. I don't like the fact that he tortured animals and things like that. I want Jason to be a character who is separate from people like Leatherface, because Leatherface grew up doing this kind of stuff, or Michael Myers grew up doing this kind of stuff. But I think it's more interesting if Jason Voorhees just grew up as a normal child, just like any other kid. The only difference being he looked different. But he was just a normal, innocent child who had a horrible accident and died, and the only thing that made him become a psychopath was the death of his mother, because of how much he cared about her. But before that, he was just a normal child. But in this, they decided not to do that, and instead make him a psychopath long before he even died. I'm not a fan of it. I just think it's bad compared to what they could have done. It's far more interesting if Jason is just a normal kid before he dies. It makes his death much sadder. How are you supposed to feel bad for Jason drowning if he was killing animals and stuff? Like, now I don't feel bad for him dying at all. One of the best things about Jason Voorhees' origin is that it's tragic. You know, it's a child drowning. But when you read this, it's like, oh, he kind of deserved it though, because he was a horrible kid. Pamela goes into Jason's room to talk to him. He's hiding under his bed, probably afraid that she was going to be mad at him for what he did, but instead she's loving towards him and says that she's going to be alongside him to make sure he's okay, and that it's fine, like what he did was okay. She gets a call from Mr. Christie, who tells her to come to the camp, but Pamela says that she can't because she needs to be with Jason. However, Mr. Christie comes up with an idea that'll make them both happy. He's like, hey, why don't you bring Jason along? He would love it here. So Pamela brings Jason to Camp Crystal Lake, where she introduces him to Barry and Claudette, these two counselors. The interesting thing about Barry and Claudette is that they are the counselors that Pamela kills at the beginning of Friday the 13th. Because the way the movie opens is, it opens with her killing them, and then we cut to Annie, where she gets abducted by Pamela and killed as well. Jason is written as this very shy, closed-in child who's a little bit afraid of meeting these counselors, but they are really nice to him and just want him to have a nice time. And this would be great if they hadn't already established him as a psychopath. Like, imagine this scene playing out without having seen him killing all those cats and stuff. He's just a normal kid, he's really shy, and these counselors are trying to help him open up and come out of his shell and just have a good time at the camp. It would have made it a lot more wholesome. It would have made you it would allow you to endear yourself to Jason before the unfortunate thing happens. While Pamela is cutting carrots, she thinks about her son. Her son, Jason, is currently at the docks with all the other kids. One of them is kind of making fun of him for being afraid of water, but unlike the movies, it is never established in this that Jason is bullied by anybody, which is a huge difference. In the movies, he was bullied heavily, and that's what eventually led to his death, but in this, everyone's kind of nice to him. Like, the girls are, like, holding Jason all nicely in this little panel here. She's got his arm around him, kind of, you know, being there with him. Seems pretty nice. Except for this one guy who's making fun of him for not liking the water. But even then, just seems like he's, like, kind of jabbing him friendly. Just being like, oh, look at him. Like, he's afraid of the water. Haha. Pamela's so focused on Jason that she doesn't even notice that she's cut her finger. And everyone around her is just like, oh my god, that's a lot of blood. Pamela, are you okay? He's like, oh, fancy that. Don't worry, it's just a little scratch. And in the present day, after Pamela has killed Annie, she mentions that it always ticked her off that people were squeamish around blood. She never understood it. Talks to Annie as she puts Annie's body in her car. I've never had much patience for those who get woozy at a little blood. That's an indulgence of the privilege. Most of us will see much spilled blood in our lives. It's how we enter this world, and sometimes it's how we leave it, don't you agree? Now, where was I? Oh yes. I like these bits of Pamela talking to Annie's corpse, kind of getting a little bit more of that character that we saw in the movie, but we didn't really get to see her very much in the movie, so it's nice to see a little bit more of her interacting with the world of Friday the 13th, and because Pamela is an interesting character. And so now we get to the part of the story that everybody knows. Jason is playing in the sand. Barry and Claudette decide that they're gonna have head off and have sex. Because as we all know, two counselors went off to have sex. Turned out it was Barry and Claudette. That's why Pamela killed him at the beginning of the movie, because they were the ones responsible for Jason's death. The way you think it plays out is they head off, they have sex, Jason gets pushed into the water by all the other kids, he drowns, and Barry and Claudette aren't there to see it, because they're off having sex. But that's not what happens. That's what happens in the history of the movies. It plays out very differently in this, in a way that doesn't make any sense. Just makes you wonder why they changed it and why they made it so bad. In this version, Jason sees Barry and Claudette head off into the woods and follows them. This is all new. This is never established in the movies. He follows them and he watches them having sex. And then he starts attacking Barry, and I guess this is supposed to be an allusion to Jason hating sex, or hating this kind of stuff, because he starts attacking Barry as if he's telling him off. I think it's probably his mother instilling into him that sex is bad, or being like debauchery is terrible. Barry understandably knocks Jason off. He calls him an ugly phoebe, which is a little harsh, but I don't blame Barry for this at all. Jason was attacking him in this version. So you don't feel bad for him when Barry knocks him off, because Jason deserves it. Because of this, Jason runs off crying, and Barry is like, oh, damn it. And so he chases after Jason. Jason runs across the dock, and in this version, he jumps straight into the lake. And they're like, oh, Jason! He jumps into the lake, and he drowns. And Pamela's just like, what's going on? It's like, that kid Jason, like, he jumped into the water, and she's like, oh, my Jason? Jason! And so that's her realizing that her son has drowned. And none of this makes any sense. It's so bad. How did this even happen? Why didn't they save him? In the original version of the story, it made sense. Jason got pushed into the river by all of these bullies, these other kids that were bullying him. And Barry and Claudette were too busy having sex to even see it. And by the time they noticed, it was too late. He already drowned. But in this version, he jumped into the lake of his own will, which is weird. But then Barry is right there. Why doesn't he jump into the lake and save him? He just stands there and watches Jason drown. It doesn't make any sense. It's like, why did they even change it? Jason drowns in the lake. The police don't do anything about it. Barry and Claudette just get off scot-free, which doesn't sit right with Pamela. And she vows vengeance against them. And what upsets her even more is that not even a year later, the camp is reopened like nothing ever happened. And Barry and Claudette are hired as counselors at the camp. This is just the beginning of Friday the 13th at this point. They head off into a barn to have sex. They're followed by Pamela Voorhees. In the movie, you don't get to see that it's her. She follows them up into the attic of the barn where they're having sex. They notice that she's there, and Barry tries to plead with her and says, like, we weren't doing anything, we were just having sex. She stabs him in the stomach and kills him, and then she walks over to Claudette and kills her too. I know what you were thinking. They were just children themselves. Perhaps. But when raising good children, if you spare the rod, you spoil the child. And I could not have that. Children need discipline. And I am nothing if not a good mother. Nothing at all. Pamela Voorhees arrives at Camp Crystal Lake with Annie's body, and at this point, we are at the end of the movie, Friday the 13th. All of the counselors have been killed by Pamela, and as she arrives at the camp, Alice is there, believing that Pamela is a good person because she doesn't know that Pamela is the murderer. So she runs up to her and is pleading for her help. She's like, oh, they're all dead. Everyone's dead. It's like, all right then. Come on, show me. Pamela tells Alice that she's gonna go off and see the bodies and take a look at them. And Alice is begging her not to leave her because Pamela will die too. And Pamela is just like, me? Oh my, ha ha ha. And we zoom in on her car where we see Annie's body. And Pamela says, I'm not afraid. And it's because she's the murderer. And that's where the book ends. It ends like that. It ends pretty anticlimactically. It ends the way that you would expect it to end, but that doesn't mean it's a good ending. Overall, I thought this book was largely disappointing. First of all, it's only 2 issues, which it means it's really short, and a large part of those issues is just copying scenes from the movies. The beginning and the ending of Friday the 13th. So instead of focusing entirely on the actual origin, we focus on stuff that we already know or things that we've already seen. I was hoping that this book was going to only deal with Pamela's life. We didn't need to see Jason's origin. We didn't need to see him die. We've already seen that before. I wanted this book to show us things that we hadn't seen. And they did. They did originally show us a lot of stuff that we hadn't seen. We got to see Pamela's life before she gave birth to Jason. We got to see the day that she gave birth to Jason. We got to see her work at a local diner, how she ended up getting a job at the camp. Yes, her marriage to Elias was one of those predictably abusive relationships that these characters go through in these horror movie origins, but at least it was something. At least it was something different. At least we were getting a look into Pamela as a character when she was much younger. Once we get to Camp Crystal Lake, that's when the book declines in quality, in my opinion, because that's when we begin focusing more on Jason than Pamela. Pamela becomes a secondary character in her own book. Jason Voorhees is the main character of the second issue until his death. After that, it's just scenes from the movie that we've already seen, and it's just pointless. Just taking up page space. It's like they ran out of ideas when it came to establishing Pamela's life. Or they had to end it with Jason's death. Man, it would have been much more interesting if it didn't have Jason's death in it at all. Or if it just ended with his death. Where we had a whole bunch of stuff, we got to see all of Pamela's life and that, and then the very last page is Jason's death. And that's where it ends. Because we know what happens after that. We don't need to see her killing Barry and Claudette. We don't need to see her meeting Alice for the first time. We don't need to see any of that. If I wanted to see that stuff, I would just watch Friday the 13th again. Just a very disappointing take on an origin story. I don't even recommend reading it, honestly, because there's nothing interesting about it. You can already guess what her origin is before you even read it, because that's how predictable it is. Abusive marriage, she gives birth to Jason, she kills her ex-husband, she becomes a counselor or a cook at the camp, and Jason dies. That's it. That's the whole origin. I'm really bummed. It's always a really disappointing experience when I'm excited to read a book because the premise is intriguing, and then I read it and it's disappointing. They had so much freedom to fill in the blank spots of Pamela's past, and they completely dropped the ball and just did all of the stereotypical, predictable stuff. But yeah, that's Pamela's tale. It's not terrible, it's just disappointing. I still hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you next week when we dive into more Friday the 13th comic books. So I'll see you then. Have a good one.